safe here. Season 1, The Outcast. Episode 4, The Raven. If you're new to this podcast, welcome. Please start at episode 1. They gathered around their regular table at breakfast that morning. Kat sat with them. They all had dark circles under their eyes, as if their dream wasn't a dream at all, but a real trek they had taken the night before. Kim's hair was in pigtails again. She wore a white sweater that looked like fur. "How do we make it stop?" she said, to no one in particular. Her head was in her hands. Betty leaned forward, her black button-down contrasting with Kim's all-white ensemble. "These dreams are telling us something," she said. "They were all going crazy," Tracy said. She wore a turquoise and navy giant polka-dotted shirt. She had neglected to draw on eyebrows that morning. She looked blank. "Speaking of crazy, does anyone have a tampon?" Delia rolled her eyes. "You are such a tampon mooch. Just go to Nurse Francine. The school's tampons are from the 1930s. I'm pretty sure there's asbestos in them." She looked at everyone at the table, eyes pleading. "Come on, I know you have them on you." "I don't," Betty said. "Otherwise, I'd give you one of mine." "Oh, you haven't joined our special period circle yet." "Soon," Tracy said. Betty nodded. "In my last school, we were all synced up. There were 4 days a month when even the teachers were scared of us." "Same here," Kim said. "It's gross." She reached into her backpack and slid a tampon across the table towards Tracy. "I'm keeping track," she said to her. Tracy bowed in thanks. Kat cleared her throat. She sat at the edge of the group, entirely comfortable. "What are the dreams trying to tell us, Betty?" she asked. Betty swallowed. "Okay, how many of you saw the hole in the wall?" Kim, Tracy, and Kat raised their hands. "And how many of you saw the—" Betty paused, glancing at Katrina. "The arm." Katrina grimaced. Kat and Delia raised their hands. "You know I did," Katrina said. She was in her flannel armor, as she had been since the nightmares began. "I think these are clues," Betty continued. She noticed a group of girls tentatively approaching their table. They all strained to listen. She ignored them. "And I think they're telling us what happened to Zelda. We have to pay attention to the differences. They're bringing us in different directions." "What if it's a trick?" Delia asked. "Like, what if someone's leading us astray?" "But these dreams are ours," Betty said. "No one else is controlling them. Our conscious mind can't quite figure it out, so our dreams are filling the gaps." "But—" Someone Betty didn't know interjected. She stood behind her. Betty turned around. Whose arm was it? The question emboldened some girls to sit at their table. A crowd had formed. Betty was somehow the expert, or the culprit, as Valerie had accused. "I don't know," Betty admitted. "Wasn't it Zelda's arm? I mean, if it was Zelda moaning up there?" Tracy asked. She looked sadly and a little fearfully at Katrina. Katrina shook her head. "Zelda didn't wear those friendship bracelets. She would have died before she put one on." Betty saw Delia cover her own friendship bracelets with her palm. "That was Eliza's arm," a girl standing at the end of the table said. She had red cheeks and short brown hair. Everyone looked at her. "Who's Eliza?" Kim asked. "I've never heard of her." "She was a student here. She disappeared about 2 years before Zelda did," the red-cheeked girl said. "Whoa, hold up," Katrina said, eyes wide. "What are you talking about? Why haven't we heard of this?" "Because no one cared," the red-cheeked girl said. "I was one of her only friends. Everyone else who knew her has left the school. She just disappeared one day and it was like she had never existed." "What the fuck?" Kim said. "So, like, girls just disappear from the school. I'm calling my parents." "That was definitely her arm," the red-cheeked girl said. "I saw one of the friendship bracelets I made her. It was purple." Her face twisted as she tried to hold back tears. There was a rumble around the table as everyone started talking at once. "Wait," Betty said. She was surprised when everyone stopped talking and listened to her. Everyone thought she was an authority. It was something she never experienced. She saw Valerie through the space between two people in front of her. She glared at the crowd. "So if 2 girls disappeared, maybe that's why our dream is split into 2, Betty continued. "The 2 directions are telling us what happened to them both." She paused. "We have to go into the woods. I think the cabin is real." "Oh, hell no," Kim said. The group started rumbling again, and 2 teachers appeared beside the crowd. "Break it up," Mr. Manzini said. Another teacher Betty didn't know, with gray hair and a gray suit, started leading the standing students away like a shepherd. Eat your breakfast or head to class. No standing. Katrina, Kim, Delia, Tracy, Kat, and Betty looked at each other. We should find the cabin, Delia said. We could sneak into the woods after lights out. Katrina nodded first, then Betty and Tracy followed. Kim stared at them with her mouth open. Are you all crazy? She asked. 2 girls disappeared. Not just Zelda, but a girl that apparently no one cares about. Newsflash, Katrina interrupted. No one cares about any of us. That's why we're here. Well, you can all go into the woods where 2 girls died and search for a mysterious blood-covered cabin, but I'm going to stay here. Kim folded her arms across her chest. Don't you want to know what happened? Delia asked. Maybe we can stop it, Betty said. We might die, Katrina said. But also, we could find out something that would bring this school down. Kim shook her head, but she was thinking about it. Betty caught up with the red-cheeked girl after first period. She walked up from behind her in the shadowy hallway. Hi, Betty said. The girl turned and stopped walking. Come here, the red-cheeked girl said, and pulled her into a darkened nook Betty hadn't seen before. It was so dark she could barely see. She touched the walls. They were cold and rough like brick. It must have been an enormous old fireplace. It was too small to be a room. We used to smoke in here. The old chimney catches the evidence, she said. What's your name? Betty asked. I'm Betty, she added awkwardly. Rose, or Rosie, it doesn't matter, she said. Are you a senior? Rose nodded. Can you tell me more about Eliza? I mean, she was a loner. We were friends because of weed, mostly, but we hung out all the time. She was nice. Was she in Mr. J's class? No. We were freshmen when she disappeared. Mr. J only teaches juniors. Yeah, of course, Betty said. Did she ever go to Mr. Wilbertson's office? Rose thought for a minute. No, I don't think so. Although... She paused. What? Betty said eagerly. I think I remember Mr. Wilbertson not being at the assembly, which is right after she was gone. Is that strange? Betty asked. Yeah, he doesn't miss assemblies. I was a freshman, but even I knew that. What do you think happened to her? Betty asked. I don't know. I always thought her parents had taken her away and she didn't get a chance to say goodbye. She didn't know my address, so she couldn't write me letters. I honestly haven't thought of her in a year until that dream. I'm sorry, Betty said. For what? I mean, I'm sorry about your friend. Betty blushed in the dark. Did you ever talk to her parents? I didn't, Rose said, sounding sad. I don't know why. I could have called, but I guess I didn't. What was her last name? Betty asked. Sands. Eliza Sands, Rose said. I gotta go. Wait, Betty said. Where does she live? Rose stopped outside the fireplace. The harsh light on her was jarring after their conversation in the dark. She lived right next to Lake Superior, not far from here. Ashtown or Washland. It was one of those towns. Thank you, Betty said to Rose's back as she walked away. Betty rushed out and scraped her arm against the bricks. It left a row of pink lines. Eliza Sands, Betty whispered to Katrina during Mr. J's class. She noticed Kat listening and glanced at her from time to time to open up the conversation, but Katrina kept her eyes on Betty. She disappeared 3 years ago, 2 years before Zelda did. She was never in Mr. J's class because, ladies, Mr. J had seen them whispering, let's join the class, shall we? We were talking about Moby Dick, Mr. J, Katrina said. The sperm chapters. Touché, Mr. J said, winking. Ew, Katrina mouthed at Betty. Does the library have phone books? Betty was in the library with Miss De Silva. They sat at a table together near the entrance. We do, she said. What areas are you looking for? She wore glasses and a 1950s-style navy dress. Her long hair was in a ponytail. Betty felt stupid in her long-sleeved denim shirt she had already worn 2 times in 6 days. Ashtown and Washland. And the surrounding towns, I guess. Miss De Silva thought for a moment. They're all in that little inlet that juts into Lake Superior. It's called the Lakeshore area. You can get the phone book for there. She smiled and leaned in, conspiratorially. And what's this one about? This what? Betty asked. So far your research has been about shared dreams, Scandinavia, and now Lakeshore. I'm dying to know what you're looking for. Betty really wanted to trust Miss De Silva, who noticed her discomfort. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to," she added. "It's none of my business." "I'm sorry," Betty said. "I'm not good at all of this. I mean, talking to people. At my last school, I confided in our guidance counselor about a boy from the neighboring school. We had..." She trailed off. "And I didn't want to, but we did." Betty sighed. "Oh, honey, that's awful. I'm so sorry." Betty was again struck by how young Miss De Silva was and how old she sounded. "It's fine," Betty said, blushing. "I told my guidance counselor in confidence, but she told the principal and my parents, and I got expelled." "Well, that's unethical," Miss De Silva said. "Anyway, that's why I have trouble sometimes connecting with older people." Miss De Silva smiled. "Anything you tell me stays between us." Betty took a deep breath. "Did you know Zelda?" "The girl who disappeared?" Miss De Silva shook her head. "I knew of her, but I didn't know her very well. It's so sad what happened to her." "Yeah, well, this is going to sound crazy, but we all had the same dream the other night, and we think Zelda was in it." "Who's we?" "Everyone at the school. I mean, every student." Miss De Silva was taken aback. "Every one of you had the same dream?" Betty nodded. "Twice now." "You know, I thought you were all acting a little strange the other day. You all seemed..." She paused. "Jumpy." "And then we found a map of the school and I guess the Great Lakes forest around it, and it was overlaid with those coordinates I was telling you about that ended up being different areas in Scandinavia. And around the same time, we noticed this red lichen in forestry class, and Miss Ronslum said that kind of lichen only grows in Scandinavia." Betty hadn't breathed the whole time she was talking, and now she panted as if she had been running. Miss De Silva furrowed her brows. "I can't make heads or tails of that." She looked up at the ceiling. "Scandinavia," she whispered upwards. Then she turned to Betty. "What was in the dream?" "A cabin." "And that's where Zelda was?" Betty nodded. "You can hear her in the dream, but you can't see her. You could see..." Betty stopped herself. "Did you know Eliza Sands?" "I've never heard that name. Did she go to this school?" Betty nodded. 3 years ago. She was a freshman. Then she disappeared. That was before my time, but..." Miss De Silva paused. "If another student disappeared, surely we would hear about it." "That's why I need the phone book," Betty said. "You know, when I'm trying to find lost stories, conversations give the best clues. I'm a librarian, so I thought it was through a trail of documents, which it often is. But talking to people, really listening to them, that may be the only way to find what you're looking for." "What are you looking for?" Betty asked her, blushing. "Right now I'm looking into some lost short stories by these two sisters that lived around here in the 1920s and 30s. No one actually knows if they're still alive." "Oh, cool. What were the stories about?" Betty leaned into the table. "They were Gothic horror stories, little vignettes, sometimes just describing a setting. They were published in some local papers, and they had one published collection. But then they and the rest of their stories disappeared." "Have you found anything?" Betty asked, feeling nervous about how familiar the disappearance of young women around here was starting to sound. "I've found a couple of more stories, through finding some relatives nearby. People around here do not open up easily, but once they do..." She trailed off. Betty sat back in her chair. 2 students had wandered in, and they lingered by the front desk, whispering and giggling. "I should get back to work," Miss De Silva said. "Let me know what you find." She squeezed Betty's shoulder as she walked past her towards the front desk. A couple of minutes later, Betty had 16 photocopied pages of every sands in Lakeshore. Katrina slept, making soft snoring noises every couple of minutes. Betty was wide awake. She knew she had to use the bathroom, but didn't want to go out into the hallway. It was extra dark outside. The clouds obscured the moon, and the hallway lights were so dimmed you basically had to feel along the wall to find the door to the bathroom. Betty couldn't hold it any longer. She pulled off her covers and swung her legs over the side of the bed. The floor was ice. Goosebumps rippled up her legs. She could only see a dark mass where Katrina slept. She tiptoed past. Outside her door, naked bulbs shone dimly in a row along the ceiling, stretching until they disappeared around a bend. They were so dim they lit only 2 inches around them. Blackness filled the hallway below. Betty walked slowly into it. She could only hear the creaks of her own footsteps. She touched the wall with her fingertips, feeling the ridges and indents of another bedroom door. She brushed over the chill of the doorknob. When she felt the flat metal panel of the bathroom, she pushed it open and the automatic fluorescent light stung her eyes. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her black hair was a tousled mop around her pale white face. Her black t-shirt swallowed her. She looked like a ghost. When she was done using the toilet, she took a moment by the door. She had an uneasy feeling. She swung the door open and was plunged into darkness. Her eyes did not adjust, and it was like she was in a cave. She couldn't see a thing. Again she held her hand out to feel the wall, and that's when she heard it. A creak, coming from behind. She gasped and turned, but could see nothing. She blinked hard, willing her eyes to adjust. The hallway came slowly into view, but she couldn't see anything in the shadows that swallowed it. She turned towards her room and started walking quickly, running her hand along the wall. She imagined someone coming up behind her. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she speed-walked on her tiptoes. Just as she was at her door, she heard it again. The creak of a footstep. She gasped and turned toward the sound. At the end of the hallway, where it curved and disappeared, she saw Mr. Wilbertson. Just his head, outlined in darkness. It seemed to float as it stared at her. Betty didn't take any time to confirm what she was seeing. She grabbed her doorknob and wrenched it open, practically throwing herself into the room. She stood there panting. Then she grabbed her desk chair and wedged it under the doorknob before she threw herself into bed and pulled the covers over her head. She clasped her hands together to stop them from shaking. "What the fuck is this?" Katrina said the next morning, waking Betty up. She was standing by the chair wedged under the doorknob. Betty rubbed her eyes and sat up, squinting. "Oh," she said. "Oh?" Katrina asked. She sat on the end of Betty's bed. "What's going on?" "I went to the bathroom. I thought I saw—" She paused. Katrina's eyes widened. "Who?" she yelled, slapping her arm. "Mr. Wilbertson. In the hallway. I could have imagined it. Motherfucker," she yelled, standing. "Do you think he knows we're looking into Zelda? And into that other girl? What was her name?" "Eliza." Betty furrowed her brows, thinking. How could he? I mean, could he? I bet they fucking spy on us. They're all perverts. Katrina was pacing now. Betty got up and stood in front of her. "So you're in?" she asked. "What are you talking about?" "Taking the school down like you said yesterday." Katrina smiled. "Hell yes," she said. "Okay, let's get a sick day from Nurse Francine," Betty said defiantly. "We have work to do." 30 minutes later, they were back in their dorm room with all 16 photocopied pages of the Sands from the phone book spread out on Betty's bed. "I'll do the first round of calls. You take notes," Betty said. "I don't get how you're suddenly in charge," Katrina said. Betty ignored her, but could see from her periphery that she was smiling. The first number was Alan Sands. Betty picked up the receiver. "Wait, what are you going to tell them?" Katrina asked, pulling at the cord. "I'll just say I'm a reporter." "I don't know," Betty said. Katrina rolled her eyes. "You really don't prepare, do you?" "Too stressful," Betty said, dialing. The phone rang twice. "Yeah," a man with a gravelly voice said. He sounded far away. Katrina leaned into the receiver to hear. "Hi, is this Alan?" Betty asked. "Who's this?" Betty looked at Katrina, panicked. Katrina rolled her eyes and grabbed the phone. "Hi, this is Linda Biscuit." Betty covered her mouth to stop from laughing. Katrina slapped the air, just missing her. "I'm with the Lake Superior Tribune, and I'm doing a story on girls' schools in the area." "How'd you get this number?" Alan asked. Then he coughed several times in a row. "The phone book, sir." Katrina made a face at Betty. "I'm looking for a former student of the Cloisters, Eliza Sands. Is she a relation of yours?" "Never heard of her," he said, and hung up. Katrina laughed as she put the receiver back in its cradle. "This is fun," she said. "I mean, for trying to find a dead girl." "There's only 1,000 more to go," Betty said. She put her finger on the next line in the list. "Ayanna Sands," she said. Katrina dialed. It rang 3 times. "Hello?" a young-sounding woman said. "Is this Ayanna Sands?" Katrina asked. "Who am I talking to?" Ayanna answered. "This is Patricia Locksmith." Betty fell back onto the bed, stifling her laugh. "Excuse me," Ayanna said. She sounded irritated. "I'm from the Lake Superior Tribune, and I'm doing a story on girls' school in the area." "I've never heard of the Lake Superior Tribune," Ayanna interrupted. "We're an independent paper," Katrina said. Are you by any chance related to Eliza Sands? She was a student in the cloisters. No, I'm not. What did you say your name was? Thank you, Katrina said and hung up the phone quickly. Why is everyone so suspicious around here? Betty asked. You're not from around these parts, are you? Katrina said in a fake cowboy accent. Betty rolled her eyes and looked down at the paper. We need to hurry up. Bert Sands. Katrina dialed. It rang once. Bert here, he answered. Hello, Bert Sands, Katrina started. What is it? He sounded impatient. Yes, do you know an Eliza Sands? She was a student at a school called the Cloisters. She paused when there was an awkward silence. I'm doing a story. My cousin is a Sands, and he married an Eliza. She's in her 50s now. What is this about anyway? Oh, that's not the Eliza Sands we're looking for. Thank you anyway, Katrina said. Who is this? They heard Bert say as Katrina hung up. Do we sound sketchy, or is everyone paranoid? Betty asked. Both, Katrina answered. They got through 84 names over the next hour. 32 went to an answering machine. They had gotten to the next name in the list, Gerald Sands, when they heard their doorknob shake in its socket. The chair was jammed against the door again. They decided to keep it as protection. Betty and Katrina jumped off the bed and flung the papers under it. Betty dove under her covers while Katrina opened the door. Mrs. Albert stood on the other side. She wore a lime green wool skirt suit and a paisley silk scarf. She stepped into the room with a single heel click. She looked at Katrina, then snapped her head to Betty. She took a sharp breath in. You've taken a lot of sick days recently. She peered steadily at Katrina. Katrina stared back, smirking, then coughed in Mrs. Albert's face. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Albert, she said. I hope you don't catch what we have. Betty pulled the sheet over her smile. Mrs. Albert glared at Katrina. I'm not worried, but she took a step backwards. Betty, she said, looking down. Betty sat up. Yes, she said with an exaggerated croak. You've only been here a week and you already have a poor attendance record. This is not good. I'm going to have to call your parents. Oh, please don't call them, Betty cried. I think it's that I'm new here. New people and, new allergens? Betty paused. Is the reason I'm getting sick all the time. And I'm giving it to Katrina. Katrina coughed again. Mrs. Albert pursed her lips together. Please, I'll power through it. I really want to do well here. Mrs. Albert listened, then nodded curtly. We'll be keeping an eye on both of you. She turned again to Betty. And don't let this one take you down with her, she said, motioning to Katrina. She slammed the door behind her. Katrina waited until the footsteps were far away to shove the chair under the doorknob again. Her eyes were red. Bitch, she said. She turned to Betty, wiping her nose. Come on. They reached under the bed, grabbing the rest of the pages. It took 2 more hours to get every name on the list. All answering machines and hang-ups and suspicion. Betty sat on the floor in the middle of all the papers and sighed. Maybe they moved. It was 3 years ago. Maybe they were assholes, Katrina said, like everyone else around here. She was lying on the bed with her head upside down towards the floor. She wrapped and unwrapped the phone cord around her wrist. Did she just disappear and no one cares? Betty asked. I don't know how many times I have to say it. No one cares about us. And we're the lucky ones. The cord left a mark on Katrina's wrist. Betty joined Miss Ronslum's class that afternoon. Kat was waiting for her. Where were you this morning? She said. She wore a white baby doll dress over a fuchsia t-shirt. Betty wore her black dress. We got a sick note and tried to find Eliza's parents. And? No luck. Betty sighed. They fell silent as they approached the rest of the class, gathered by some large roots of a tree pushing through the ground. Miss Ronslum was fumbling with papers, while some girls laid in the grass, looking up towards the sky. The rest meandered around the edge of the forest. Betty saw one girl pull some bark off a tree. Miss Ronslum? Kat asked as they approached. She looked up, frazzled, but smiled at them. Lichen girls. She dropped a piece of paper and crouched down to get it. Yeah, that's what we wanted to talk to you about, Betty said. That was lichen, Miss Ronslum said. The oddest thing. Can you date lichen? Kat asked as Miss Ronslum stood back up. Can you tell how old it is? You sure can, she said, gesturing for Betty and Kat to follow. They walked towards the area of the forest where Kat found the red tree root the week before. It's not exact, Miss Ronslum said as she squatted near the lichen, but you can tell how old the lichen is by how thick it is. She pulled out a metal ruler. Betty and Kat crouched more closely. That's because once it covers the surface completely, it starts to grow upwards. How old can they get? Betty asked as Miss Ronslin pierced the lichen with the ruler, pushing it in delicately. Some red dust floated to the ground. Oh, thousands of years, Miss Ronslin said. But that's in the Arctic. When her ruler hit the wood of the root, she leaned in. How deep is that? Kat asked. Miss Ronslin put her thumbnail against the number on the ruler and pulled it out. Now this is not exact, she said as she held it up to her face. But this is 42 millimeters. This kind of lichen grows from 2 to 5 millimeters per year, so that's... She paused. That's 150 years, Kat said. Give or take 50. Wait, is that the 1840s? Betty asked. It's a range, Miss Ronslin said. But yes, early 1800s most likely. She stood up with the ruler and some lichen dust she rubbed between her forefinger and her thumb. This is so exciting. Aren't you excited, girls? Kat and Betty looked at each other. There was a red flashing light on Betty and Katrina's phone when Betty entered her dorm room that night. Katrina wasn't there. Betty had just taken a shower and was wrapped in a towel. She put her basket of toiletries on her desk, and she unwrapped herself and towel-dried her hair. She pulled on her giant black t-shirt and some sweatpants. Her hair dripped down her neck as she squeezed the ends with the towel. That's when she noticed the light. She stared for a beat before rushing over and pushing the message button. "Hello?" said a young-sounding girl's voice. "I'm looking for Suzanne somebody? From the Lake Superior Tribune? Eliza is my sister." She was my sister. "Do you have information about her? Please call me back." "Oh, I'm Isabel." There were several clicking sounds before she hung up. Betty stared in disbelief at the phone. She listened to the message 2 more times. Katrina came in from her shower in the middle of the second. "What the hell?" she said. "We found them," Betty said. "I can't believe it." "Call them back," Katrina shouted, dropping her towel to the floor and pulling on her sailor pajama set. Betty froze. Oh my God. Katrina rolled her eyes and grabbed the receiver. She dialed the callback button while they shared the receiver, heads together. It rang twice and a woman answered. "Hello," she said. "Hi, this is Suzanne," Katrina said. "I'm returning your call. Isabel reached out. We were calling about... Oh, I remember your message. Please don't bother us again. Goodbye." "But wait," Katrina stalled. "We just need to confirm that Eliza Sands did attend the cloisters." "Look, I'm not consenting to anything on the record. We just want to put this behind us. Eliza did go to the cloisters, and then she ran away." "She ran away?" "Yes. She was practically an adult, and it was her choice. If you do find her, you can tell her we're here if she wants to come home." Betty frantically mouthed a question at Katrina to ask, and Katrina pushed her head away. "But when did you last see her?" she asked. "That's all I have time to talk about. Please don't call us again. Goodbye." They both listened to the sound of the dial tone for a full 30 seconds before slowly hanging up. "That is so fucking weird," Katrina said. "She was practically an adult?" Betty asked. "It was like they were glad Eliza was gone." "They probably were. They sent her here to get rid of her, so when she disappeared, they're like, oh, she's a runaway. That's cheaper." "That can't be true," Betty said, shaking her head. "Would your parents be happy if you ran away?" Katrina asked her, arms crossed. Betty's face flushed as the answer came to her quickly. "So that's why no one's heard of it, because she was never declared missing. Then 2 years later, another girl goes missing, but it's not as smooth this time," Katrina continued. "Or is it? What if more girls went missing that we haven't heard of?" "No," Katrina said. "This school is too small. I came here a year after Eliza disappeared. I would have noticed." "Would you?" Betty asked. "Yes," Katrina shouted. "Girls go missing all the time. A girl in a school of 100 people went missing, and we never would have known if we didn't dream about her dismembered arm." Katrina stared at her, her face angry at first, and after a moment, sad. "Well, I would have noticed," she mumbled. Suddenly they heard a noise. It sounded like a scraping against the outside of their door. Betty jumped onto her bed. "Oh my God, is that a rat?" she yelped. "Shh," Katrina said, staring at the front door. It was completely silent. They held their breath. The scraping started again. Small, quick scratches, persistent as if from a tiny claw. The sound lasted only a couple of seconds, then stopped. The large wooden door stood completely still. It seemed to challenge them to open it. Betty's heart pounded in her chest. "What was that?" she asked Katrina, starting to pull the covers around her. "Fuck this," said Katrina as she marched toward the door and swung it open. Betty almost screamed as she did. No one was there. The hallway was dark. Katrina poked her head out and looked left and right. She motioned for Betty to come, who hesitated, then complied. There was no one in the hallway. No girls coming from the bathroom, no hall monitors, no one. It was as dark as when Betty saw Mr. Wilbertson. They listened for a moment, but it was as silent as a morgue. "We heard that!" Katrina shouted down the hallway. Betty grabbed her arm. It seemed to echo. No one stirred. Betty had an idea. She walked into the hallway and started to close their door, examining the wood. "What are you doing?" Katrina asked. "I don't know," Betty said truthfully. And then she saw it. A small marking at the top left corner of the door. It looked like someone had chiseled a bird into the wood. It was crude, but it almost looked like a raven. Betty touched it, ran her fingers along the groove. It was warm. "What the hell?" Katrina asked. She moved Betty's hand aside and stared. "Has this always been here?" Betty asked, knowing the answer. "Hell no. I mean, I haven't noticed it before." Katrina sounded for a moment unsure of herself. Then she marched down the hallway and stopped at every room, staring at each doorway. When she returned, Betty already knew what she was going to say. "There's no carving anywhere else. It's only on our door." Her hands shook. "They marked us," Betty said. Thank you so much for listening to We Are Not Safe Here, Season 1, The Outcast. Come back next week for Episode 5. Please rate, review, and subscribe, and tell a friend or two. We are not safe here.